What was the exact text order as?
USFG should create a program or project to increase water sustainability.
To substantially.
Or substantially increase water sustainability on U.S. farmland.
Alright, it was programmed.
It was programmed. The NCAA should.
You ready?
Yep.
You guys ready? First on here is about agronomic versus about pollution and proliferation of pesticides, pollutants, sulfates, and other soil sediment from ag land. And it's not caused by animal farming and production, and farming in general. Second, there's a serious environmental concerns to this because it can seriously damage ecosystems. Third, riparian zones are natural buffers and filters of natural water within ecosystems, which effectively filter out the water and filter out all pathogens within the water that helps improve it. Second, regulate. There are only a few regulations on this, most of them related to the timber industry, and almost all of them are voluntary. So the plan, USFG should substantially increase, to increase sustainability by passing a regulation that requires all agriculture industries to create a 15-meter riparian buffer zone around farm agricultural properties. So,
Can I get a copy of that, please?
can you copy that down exactly? So, yes.
So you're saying animals and like plants?
I mean, yeah, it's like farming. Yeah, farming. Riparian buffer is effectively it's like a kind of like a swampland almost in the sense. It's like, but not in the traditional sense, in that there's not really plants living there. There's this kind of special type of algae which filters out stuff. It's like, yeah, it's basically just farmland. And this plan of pass through normal means Department of Agriculture will do this. First, manage diseases. Unica's first harmful disease. These things are called this. There's harmful diseases and things that harm the U.S. health and status quo. First of all, bacteria. There's bacteria in water killing literally hundreds of people a year, and 7 people were killed in just one town in Colorado as individuals died of E. coli. Next, second, B under this, that the EPA found that agricultural runoff accounts for 48% of all water problems in the United States. C under this is the soil displacement causes runoff causes a runoff, which effectively causes eutrophication in these areas and causes creation of mini algal blooms, which can effectively kill everything in this area and causes massive creation of bacteria, which is really, really bad. Example of this is Erie Lake, where the bacteria count is significantly higher than all the average than it should be, and really nasty human health. The links plan solve first, we reduce pollutants and pathogens. In fact, this stuff effectively acts as a filter. This is empirically shown and affected in California, and it's where 67% of water pollution was reduced by enactment of this very same policy. Second, reduces nitrogen and prevents eutrophication in Ohio. 90% of nitrogen runoff was reduced when this plan was enacted. Third is revitalized biodiversity. Effective prevents erosion. Biodiversity can be repaired and it helps if the U.S. Can be improved if we stop polluting. How if we don't stop polluting, ultimately we can never solve back for this. By reducing the amount of stuff we pollute, we can effectively revitalize biodiversity, revitalize the prevention of erosion in these areas. So the impact of this first water, this empirically this causes infection. All these things have been linked to infection, liver damage, cancer, kidney failure, and even spontaneous abortion. Yes, that's right, Judge. Dead babies. Next, the CDC. This has been proven by the CDC. In addition, algal blooms are especially deadly in that they effectively create a cesspit of bacteria and death, bad disease-creating stuff, making it extremely likely for diseases to develop and spread. Not only in these more curable versions, but also in the worse diseases. Especially given the fact that there's mosquitoes and a very swampy environment in these areas, this is especially likely to propagate out superbugs as we allow for more and more of these places to happen, and as things get better, as these superbugs get better, as superbugs develop, it will inevitably lead to an uncurable virus. The CDC has already reported multiple different strains of uncurable diseases which they have been able to isolate that have killed people. It's only a matter of time if we don't stop these that will ultimately cause superbugs, which inevitably spread throughout the world, and if not causing death of everyone in the world, will cause massive amounts of suffering and pain, killing the majority of the world's population. So next environment, first of all, uniquely environment destruction is happening in the status quo. Increased pollution and ag runoff is causing serious problems. For 50% of U.S. streams have a medium or high phosphorus nitrogen count compared to what they should be. In 2010, a USGS survey found that average nitrate levels exceeded 64% of what they should be in shallow monitoring wells in the United States. Oklahoma had a 2.5% increase in spike in phosphorus after increase in soil use of artificial fertilizers. Second, pesticides cause environmental death and harm. Empirically shown in the Great Lakes, where there are over 500 compounds which should not be there, which are being isolated as harmful to human health. Next, the EPA estimates that 10.4% of common rural wells had pesticides runoff into them, causing problems. The Lakes Plan solves first. We create a buffer through groundwater and which effectively acts to prevent any kind of runoff of this kind and allows filtration before it reaches water systems and water wells, which are in agriculture and ecosystems. Second, the EPA estimates that 81% of pollution in water source streams could be prevented if this plan were enacted. Second, environmental regulation is effectively soil can regenerate its area because the soil effectively acts as a filter and slowly kind of gets the shit out of it as it goes. However, the soil needs to have this stuff stop in order to fully recover and allow it to prevent stuff from happening in the future. It's in across my third analysis on my other just add on that. Next, third, pesticides. Third, we stop pesticide runoff in California, reduced by pesticide runoff by 67%. Next, fourth, perceptions galvanizes both national and international environmental agencies to ultimately prevent this kind of runoff, and galvanizes them to do other things within environmental regulation and runoff of pollutants in general, making it much more likely for them to do this because when they see this action is successful, they'll be encouraged to do other action. So the impact algal blooms destroy biodiversity in the Great. Especially we isolate the Great Lakes as a specific region. Lake Michigan said the Department of Agriculture said Lake Michigan is especially vulnerable to this. There's 130 species of rare and endangered species in this lake that are isolated, that are specific to this region, which are key to the environment. We isolate the lake sturgeon, Indian bat, and bald eagle as particularly vulnerable. Vulnerable species. These species are particularly key because they are key to reducing vermin in the air. Parasites and vermin within the area. If these vermin were to spread, ultimately they would kill Ultimately, these parasites on these vermin and other creatures would inevitably spread to kill other creatures, just collapsing the whole biosphere. There's no way to tell. The biospheres are like rivets on a plane. There's no way to tell how you pull out rivets until one eventually destroys this area. So clearly, we sought back for algal blooms, which make it impossible for any life to live in the lakes. And prevent ultimate global biodiversity collapse, which would be devastating to the world because humans rely on it. In addition, we saw back for 200 billion.
One, two, three, and then case. Is everyone ready? Uniqueness versus business confidence is high in the status quo. We're waiting to see what Obama. Business confidence is high in the status quo. We're waiting to see what Obama's regulatory strategy will be in the second term. Large corporations were holding cash in case Romney was elected, but people are beginning to recognize that keeping money in low risk bonds isn't helping them. The links instead. The plan signals regulation at the worst possible time. It proves that that all the conservatives were right. That not filibustering caused Obama to do crazy liberal things. The agriculturalists unite, and the wealth and poor parts of the Republican Party, which means that there would be an enormous political backlash. The Ken will avoid this because Obama and the federal government are working, are willing to work with businesses. And we also have a process of negotiation that unites investors. The impact or the internal links that this collapse of business confidence means no investment in agriculture. This turns the case of the delay and causes massive unemployment. We're supposed to have to all sectors of the economy. Makes it impossible for you to solve disease because running out of manpower. Also makes it impossible for you to solve the economy because people use more pesticides in a world where they not have the manpower to farm all their land themselves, or maintain their land. Also leads to starvation because individuals don't have the money to be able to buy food for themselves, and there's no food being produced because you don't have the money to farm the land. They impacts first. The U.S. is keeping the global economy because of trade agreements, and the prevalence of the dollar at 20 currencies are pegged to the U.S. dollar. Also, we have trade agreements with many countries around the world, which means we're incapable. Which means that all these countries would collapse today. In turn, as the U.S. economy collapses like a huge web, this leads to resource wars because we are incapable of trading with our partners anymore, which leads to extinction because it quickly escalates a nuclear war. We quickly escalate using nuclear weapons at risk where it becomes trioditis. This leads to extinction to nuclear winter. Next. Framework that blends to make over discussing justifications theory and informs practice of changing the methodology causes more political questions that leads to the problem solution mindset. You have a basic pattern of behavior in the status quo which is based on a problem solution mindset where you feel compelled to act because or need for order and control trying to change the solution or a good technocratic thoughts traps us into believing the power that we have the power to manipulate the world's ontology and prevent authentic existence. The second argument is you create universal truths by managerial and technocratic thinkers which are forced onto the orientation of the world around institutions that make us forget that we live in a world with many truths. Also, you create your use of science and also chaos, and it involves resolving chaos and making all things understandable, which requires us to manipulate our view of the world in order to fit into designated solutions. The impact of first ontological damnation, us replacing authentic existence with the quantification constructed by technocratic thought and world corrects authentic existence and leads us within ontological damnation because our identity is separated from our lived ontology. This separates death because it's transgenerational and destroys our value to life. Without value to life, there's no impact to death. The second argument is that it makes silence inevitable because technocratic thought reinforces ontology and it forces us onto people violently because it opposes ontology. It's a forceful logical domination because it's infinitely striving for control in an uncontrollable world where we devalue life and ecological purity which justifies genocide of people in the environment. Alternative. Reject the technocratic thought of the affirmative team. Reject the technocratic thought of the affirmative team. Do you have any questions?
Status.
Conditional. Solvency. First, we abandoned the mindset thing fixing and just like we that frantic act of fixing precludes real and radical change which leads to policy paralysis relies on reactionary compromise. We focus on knowing the journey. We focus on knowing from the journey and changing our frame of nature from instrumental and letting it be, which means that we solve violence because we turn analogical domination. Second is the permutation of because we have to engage in a solution. Creation is also masculine performance and very simply impossible. It's impossible for us to resist technocratic ontology. This also severs with plan action and discourse we target towards female because we only have one chance for a disputed offense which is necessary against the one we see and clashes the internal into depth of education which is the point of debate. Next. The United States federal government should convene a collaborative public policy process over the issue of passing a regulation that requires all agricultural industries to create riparian zones larger than 50 meters around their properties, which includes all relevant stockholders and empowered parties. Again, the USFG should convene a collaborative public policy process over the issue of passing a regulation that requires all agricultural industries to create riparian zones larger than 50 meters around their properties, which includes all relevant stockholders and empowered parties. Condo, do you have any questions? Solvency, or competitiveness. We hold a regulatory negotiation between government officials and representatives of advocacy groups from private companies and the members of other nations. This is competitive because it steps out of the immediacy. Their time frame is also coordinated because it allows us to test multiple ways for the government to solve a problem. Also, net benefit. Unique sources and 90% of the environmental regulations are 90% of environmental regulations are violated. This, of course, because companies don't understand the regulations. Also, informing farming regulations is hard because regulators have to travel long distances and long spaces in order to cover the massive farmland. Third is that large agricultural businesses don't follow environmental regulations, so they're perceived having a chance of getting sued. It's low. The solvency is that we empower individuals to discuss various perspectives and interest rating issues. Second is that we decrease the incentive for litigation of all parties because from all parties because during litigation they can maximize the profits. Third is that even if they win, there's a the negotiated decision is worse because the environment, at least the environmental activists can litigate and individuals or better people of understanding the regulations and trees that are more likely to be enforced. The impacts that we saw, we have a solvency surplus over the farming because there's a risk. We saw that it outweighs the risk there permanent because with the negotiation decision being bad. Also, we add the momentum to a public policy making this important because it's more likely to follow the Kyoto Protocol, which is that same model. It is also the same for people of structural larger international treaties. This is necessary not only for cooperation right now, it's also necessary for climate change legislation in the future, which we would isolate as we're on the brink of right now because we're at 398 parts per million to 415. These is the tipping point at which we hit the point of no return. This means that the world masses an enormous amount of fire. We have too much acid in the ocean, which means that we are capable of growing intensive agriculture at all, which means that there's absolutely no point to do your affirmative in a world of climate change. Starting on the plan. First, there's under the space of this on entire farmland. It requires repurposing of farmland, which means you decrease your yield and profits, which is internal link. Business confidence and decreases the economic incentive to do your plan. Also, which makes it enormously unpopular, which is neither related to business confidence. Also, the algae will die in the snow because the Midwest is a very cold place during the winter, which means that you have to account for the cost of replenishing it every year. The budget for farmland is already stretched in status quo, which means there's only a risk that your project becomes unfunded in a few years. Also, industries are not inclusive of all farmland, which means that you decrease the strength of disadvantage and counterplan competitiveness. Through the inaction of your plan not complying with the word program within the resolution decreases fairness and reason to reject. Also, on your impacts, advantage one impacts. First, all your impacts are inevitable because rural and urban areas, also because the U.S. healthcare is bad, also because people are afraid to visit doctors, means that disease is inevitable. Also, it might not be because the WHO, CDC, MIT are also solving disease before they escalate. Also, you have swampy areas that is literally what a riparian zone is, which means that you only have a risk of increasing the amount of superbugs and things like malaria, which is not native to the U.S., which means that there's only risk that individuals are not genetically predisposed to be able to fight against malaria through heterozygote advantage that is currently within the genetic code of individuals who live in places where malaria is more common. Also, disease either kills the host or kills the host before it's able to spread, or it's not strong enough to kill them all, which means there's not a terminal impact of disease. Biodiversity on advantage too. 99.97% of all species that have ever existed have gone extinct, which means there's not a terminal impact or impact unique to your biodiversity advantage. Also, 6 mass extinctions happen currently, which means that there's only a risk that your species that you isolate are going to go extinct from the status quo regardless of your plan action. Also, there is not a reason why your plan is capable of solving the specific species that you articulate, especially since they do not populate farm areas. Also, the specific species that you isolate are low in populations or in debt right now, which means that ecosystems are capable of surviving without them. They would adapt to be able to fill in the niche. Biodiversity collapse is not inevitable and does not escalate because niches always fill with other species that are close enough and adapt to be more close enough. Also, the status quo is also the clean water and drinking water infrastructure system policy that happened in 2012 only risk. You would defund this program and make it possible for individuals in rural areas to be able to get urban areas to be able to get clean water, which means this is a quality of life impact that internally links to your disease impact.
Okay, order is going to be solvency page, advantage 1, or advantage 1 and advantage 2. Then the K with the new sheet on top. Counter plan, looking at benefit, business contracts.
I'm sorry, can I get that again, please?
Solvency page, or just case in order. New page, K, counter plan with net benefit, this contract.
This goes on top.
Oh, I know where is the sheet. Yes, we are. I'm ready.
All their first answer, they say there decreases any kind of economic incentive, but our argument is simply that the EPA has the authority to do this, means that they are able to mandate that the businesses do this. Then they say that algae dies, so you have to put in more money into this. Our argument is once that you create these zones, they necessarily stay there, which stops any kind of algal boom, which we saw then. Did you get their last argument?
Oh, it's
Okay. Regardless of what regardless of their third argument, EPA is the one that is able to solve this. They never indicate the way that the
Non-inclusive of all land, of all farmland is the third one.
okay. Even if that's true, we're dealing with more than 2 states, meaning that we are there's no voter here. Also, our impacts are significant to the point where we are talking about extinction level impacts are going to be a large enough reason to.
algae hibernates. We'll come back.
Okay, algae hibernates, so that necessarily means they come back. Okay, on advantage 1, you can extend the argument that other agencies are always going to check any kind of any kind of infection. Means there's probably no impact to superbugs or any of their offense there. On the environment, they say that 99.9% of species have already gone extinct. You can extend our argument that you have to use the precautionary principle and treat this as rivers on the plane. You never know which one is going to be the most important. Also, we would say that we isolate key predators that are key to the Great Lakes. Means that even if you don't have the full collapse of biomes, we were showing specifically how the Great Lakes, which is economically and important for biodiversity, is going to collapse. They say that these species will just go extinct anyway, but there's no warrant for what is true. Our second argument is that the reason why they're about to go extinct or have decrease in populations because of pollution that we are solving for. Then they say that we don't that other species are we don't solve for all the species and or we don't solve for species within the ecosystem, but Or, like, again, you can extend that the reason these species are threatened right now is because of the massive amount of pollution that's happening in the Great Lakes area. Specifically, they say other species are going to be able to come back and adapt, but the first argument is adaptation takes a really long time in order to actually change. The second argument is we isolate key predators in the area. That means that that are key to upholding that biome necessarily. This is going to outweigh any of the other impacts, because you never know when you take away one species and that's going to collapse the entire biome. New sheet. The interpretation is that the negative is allowed one conditional advocacy. The violation is that they are reading both an alt and a counter plan. They read conditionally. The first standard is going to be times 2 at the point where we have to answer both of these, and they're allowed to just kick one. It means that they always have an increase in time. Second argument is strats 2 at the point where the MG has to divide the time between multiple decisions. They're allowed to just kick one. It means that they have a strategic advantage. Next argument is going to be real world education and real debate. You don't just kick your advocacy in the middle of the speech. This is an a voter for fairness and education. You have to make up the rules of the game before you play. Also, if debate wasn't educational, schools would stop funding this. Funding the program would collapse. Evaluate and competing interpretation. Go. Okay. First argument is that the kind of problem-solving mindset they have is inevitable. The first point under this is that the way that the human mind is set up in order to isolate problems and necessarily solve them, look to any kind of act of Congress or policy of the way that this actually works. Next argument is that managerialism is always going to be inevitable in a world where you have pollution and other kind of human interaction with the environment. There are always going to be people that are trying to deal with that or somehow change the environment. The next argument is no link. We're not creating some kind of problem that we are or some kind of problem or managing the environment. We are only creating something that is naturally occurring and encouraging that to continue in order to rectify human interaction. And on go to the alt. First argument is going to be perm do all. Do plan and all non-mutually exclusive parts of the alt, which means do plan and reject the technocratic thought. This is always going to solve better because it means that you're able to. We have a net benefit of Stalinism to the point where they are having a categorical rejection of any kind of this mindset. It means that they're not able to create coalitions with people who want to question this. We are able to solve for this by integrating that. They say that perm is just a test of competition. Is that fine or do you want more?
No, also, that's fine.
Okay. Go to the counter plan. First argument is going to be perm to both. Have the U.S. Have this kind of collaboration and also ultimately implemented this. This has all the net benefits. The isolated collaboration also ensures that this plan actually happens. Next argument is that it doesn't solve because the coalition they talk about says no to the point where you have any kind of business interest there. They are going to say no to regulation just because there is some kind of fear of them necessarily means that they're not going to do this. Also, there's continued political pressure means that they're more likely to say no. They're not able to actually solve for the act.
Also, they still do the action.
Okay, yes. Second argument is it doesn't solve because they aren't actually doing anything rather than just talking. They aren't able to solve for the superbugs that we specifically isolate. On the net benefit to yeah.
To be clear, the counterplan text says regulatory, which means that there will have to be an outcome and a policy enacted after the counterplan.
Okay. Regardless, there's just collaboration that is happening right there, and there's still a possibility that these people that this collaboration says no.
Policies is watered down when it happens.
Yes. Next argument doesn't solve because policies are necessarily watered down because you have this kind of collaboration means that you're never able to solve as well as the plan. Okay. Yeah, that's fine. No benefit. Okay. On the net benefit, first, they're never actually able to solve for this. Whenever you have collaboration, there's always going to be one party that is more in control of the collaboration than the other. Means that they're able to dwarf the actual discussion that's happening. Second argument is term. You're always better able to have discussions after a policy has actually been implemented. Meaning that the perm is uniquely able to solve and create discussion after plans is implemented that actually has this kind of thing happening. On BizCon. First argument is going to be non-unique business confidence is low right now to the debt ceiling at the point where, even though Republicans have said there's some kind of temporary negotiation, it's still very unsure. And for instance, like Fitch threatened to downgrade the U.S. on the legal. First argument is that we are ensuring the long-term viability of the agriculture industry by allowing them to have an unpolluted water source means that we're ultimately controlling the lake. Second argument is the Great Lakes alone create $25 billion, which is going to solve back for any of the impacts that they are talking about. On the impact, first argument is going to be that the economy is always resilient. We look to the Great Depression as an example, or the 2008 recession. Second argument is that resource wars don't go nuclear because you're literally nuking the resource that you want. And yeah, I mean.
The order is going.
Sorry.
Oh, it doesn't confused. The order is going to be advantage 1, advantage 2.
Then bring back advantage 1.
Oh, sorry, solvency. I just have to load on the same page. It's going to be solvency, then advantage 2. Then it is going to be the critique. It's going to be then. It's going to be conditionality, the critique. What? The counterplan, the net benefit, and then the discon. Is that okay with everyone? Anyone have a problem? Okay. At the end of this debate round, the terminal defense coming off the solvency page is going to be enough for you to vote negative of 1% versus the disadvantage or the counterplus capable of solvency. First, I'm going to go to our first argument. You say that the EPA has the authority to mandate these things, but cross-apply the argument that they have counterplus law, which says that 95% of businesses don't follow these because they're incapable of doing so or because they don't understand. We are saying that they don't have enough space on their farms, which means that they're not going to be able to have these out of these places. Even if they do and they cut their farmland, this means we'll be able to decrease profits, which decreases business confidence, makes different types of farms go out of business, out of business, which decreases the sector, causing the inevitability of causing the inevitability of decline in agriculture, which leads to starvation from the disadvantage. Mass starvation is an internal impact that's going to independently outweigh biodiversity. That's going to independently outweigh the biodiversity impact. Next, you say that the use that algae hibernates. That is simply not true. It is a plant. That's weird. Next, even if algae does hibernate, we say that the cold temperatures in winter are enough to be able to freeze it. And even if this isn't true, the way that they purify is by putting it through the algae itself, which means that they're eventually going to be able to run out, which is too big of a cost to businesses, means they can't be replenished. You have implementation. No implementation quota advantage 2. First of all, the argument that 99.9% of species have gone extinct because there's absolutely no break to their impact, and we're in the middle of 6 mass extinction, which further goes to show that we haven't had extinction yet, means that quality is no abort to their keystone species argument. In addition, they say that they're protecting the Great Lakes. I don't understand how you're protecting them. You're only protecting farmland. You don't isolate specific farmland around the Great Lakes. In addition, I want the niche argument, the niche argument, which says that there's protected species within the ecosystem, which means that even if one species collapses, that the entire ecosystem is going to collapse, and adaptation happens. You said adaptation takes a long time, but this isn't true in the world. This isn't true in the world of niches. Niches where different species can simply fail. Like, go on to the conjugate. First argument, counterpation is one conditional test of the affirmative methodology and one conditional test of and one conditional policy alternative. This is always going to be best for a couple of reasons. The first one is critical thinking. We say that having more sheets of paper, increasing critical education, we have to make strategic decisions coming out of the MG. The next argument is real world and rational decision making. Real world policymakers have defended this far right and far left, which means that there's no way to make rational decisions. This is applicable to real world. The next argument is education. We need to cover both depth and breadth. This causes us to force us to have a large research base and be able to read more, which research in terms of education. The next argument is that this prevents against ambition. It says that PMP and PMR comes last. This is the only way to ensure that we're capable of generating offense when our last speech. They go on to their arguments. You see that times two strategies too. First of all, things are inevitable. If inevitable, we can read 50 topic knowledge, 50 disadvantages, or we can simply spread job reading those, which means that this is inevitable. This is an inevitable, and there's a terminal impact. The point of it is to skew the other team out of the ground. This is what every team is trying to do. Next, you say real education causes my bug, and you say there's education causes decreased funding. This isn't what?
Oh, I was going to say
hard to make a good bit, and this isn't reasonably abusive. Affirmative bias is capable of checking because you get the topic means that overall prep can become irrelevant, whereas yours can't. And there's no voting rationale. At worst, sticks with the offense that they read on the critique, which they didn't do, which means It's just a bad strategic decision coming out of the MG. One to proceed. Cross-platted permutation, cross-platted argument that says problem-solving mindset is absolutely inevitable, which means that there's no propensity for us to create any type of Stalinism. There's no offense that they can generate off of this. It doesn't become offense for them. The count plan would capture it even if it did. One to count plan. First argument is perfect. Both are two answers. The first answer is that this would still trickle into the business confidence disadvantage. We say that if you're simply implementing policy and then talk to businesses, they don't feel like they're being respected, they don't feel like their input is being given. Furthermore, this means that the business will influence in policy, which means we're going to implement policies that they can't enforce, which means you have no solvency to want to see. The next argument is that this disincentivizes the model of disincentivizes and makes the model of regulatory negotiations look weak. It increases the enforcement that benefit, which says that this type of negotiations was used in international and environmental contracts such as the Kyoto Protocol, which means that success at the local level is keeping success at the national level, which is the only way capable of solving for biodiversity to come to the real world needs to be controlled the internal way. To this, we can only do this as long as regulatory negotiations prioritize because other countries don't have the, but we don't because that's the part where we have to negotiate with other countries. You say no solvency. You said the end of business interest means that they're going to say no. This isn't true. Regulatory negotiations have worked in the past and will work in the future. It's regulatory, which means that they're not capable of saying no. They simply have to. They have to come to a policy. You say political pressure. This across the bus is happening. They won't do anything. This is regulatory negotiations. They're going to come to a compromise. Furthermore, the businesses have an incentive to look good because they don't want anyone to legislate against them within the future, which means that they want to have this policy and the most politically correct and popular policy that they possibly can. And furthermore, cross-linking this argument involved, which says that even if this policy turns out that policy doesn't fail, it doesn't prevent different other types of groups from being able to advocate for different change in this at the grassroots level, which means that which means that there's no precedent for this kind of plan to fail. Going to the enforcement disadvantage. I don't understand their arguments here. They say no solvency is capable of dwarfing the discussion. This isn't true. The discussion of regulatory negotiations has to be proven. It's capable of being proven to have solvency in order to be capable of being proven in order for it to be modeled within the international relation. This means that our discussion is very important. You say that Charlie discusses active policies across my above. This has absolutely no impact. Furthermore, absolutely no impact. I want to extend the impact here for the Kyoto Protocol. This is the only way to ensure environmental sustainability policies globally.
The way the business leaders feel invested in the policy and feel like they know it is because they have the discussion before it gets implemented.
Having the discussion before it gets implemented means that they can work out all of the points that are confusing or that they don't think they can implement. This literally guarantees us solvency. One of the business confidence said. You say the business confidence is low right now because of the debt ceiling. Two answers. The first answer is that the debt ceiling is Republicans that have said that they're going to compromise with Democrats on the debt ceiling and simply pushing it back for a couple months in order to be able to negotiate further. This means that the business confidence is kicking out after this decision. Furthermore, they have no ability. The politicians have no ability to go over the debt ceiling because it's politically unpopular, especially when most of the public already thinks that Congress is being obstructive. Means that they're guaranteed to pass it. Furthermore, the second argument is that our evidence is more specific. We specifically say have business confidence invested within the agriculture sector is going to function. We say and we indicate how investors and businesses are working cross-line because the right now business confidence is high because they have a lot of money that are in their pockets because they're waiting to see what would happen after the election. What happened on Obama's second term? They're currently on the break and don't know whether to invest or to keep their money in the low-risk bonds they're in now. But they're starting to think that the low-risk bonds are going to be able to solve or the problem, solve the problem. Next on the link debate. This is on the link debate. This means that the things that Obama is starting to create more different types of instruction policies, more different types of policies without consulting them. Means they're going to put the money back in their pockets, which would literally class the agriculture sector. You made two links. The first term is return, long-term viability. This term, long-term viability. What does it say? The first one.
They have unpolluted water, so they control
Controlling unpolluted water doesn't mean you controlling into this disadvantage. Drop down to the second link turn. They said that the Great Lakes will save $25 billion. There's more money that is invested within the agriculture sector. In addition, you don't answer that this will affect all other industries. It means that the magnitude of this means that risk outweighs the risk of a link turn. You say economy resilient. This isn't true. This isn't true. This might have been true within the first recession, but this is now a double dip recession. We have no more tricks left within our bag in order to pull out. You say no resource wars. This isn't true. Desperation means we'll do anything that we can in order to survive, which means resource wars that escalate. At worst, we simply have different types of wars and massive starvation, which outweighs the impact to declining biodiversity because it happens on a shorter time frame immediately after. And in addition, it's more probable because we have a ton of defense on the biodiversity advantage. And cross-apply that this goes global because the United States is key to economy because of trade agreements. Cool.
The order is the case, solvency, advantage 2. The counterplan, and then the dissent. Case starting with solvency, then advantage 2, counterplan, and then dissent. Can I see
Yeah.
this and the counterplan? Okay. Functionally considered net benefit that outweighs the residual link, the residual solvency in year 1 AC will independently outweigh and the impact that you could be garnering in PMR, but also things that are counterplan solves 100% of your case, and then this card would independently outweigh your case anyway. Case. There's a devastating solvency argument conceded here that magnifies our link to the dissent. You concede an argument that says that you would decrease the yield when you take amounts of land from a farmer and reappropriate it in order to be this sort of buffer around their farmland. This means that farmers would necessarily have a decreased yield because they have decreased amount of farmland. They have 50 meters decrease all the way around their field, which means that it decreases their profit. This decreases business confidence because farmers don't feel like they can trust the federal government in worlds where they don't have involvement in the negotiation and they don't understand why it's so important that they have this swampland all around their farmland. This magnifies the link to our dissent because business confidence decreases on an individual level among every single farmer that they have to implement your policy. Advantage 2. No terminal impact case means that because nature is beautiful and self-correcting, you don't have an impact to biodiversity because 99.9% of species have gone extinct and we're in the middle of a 6-max extinction right now, which means that either the species that you isolate are not important and there's no break, or their death becomes absolutely inevitable and there's nothing that you can do to stop it. Your 1AC does not have a mechanism to save these animals around the Great Lakes. Additionally, we say the biodiversity collapse does not escalate, not a coherent response to this argument. There are always species to fill a niche. The adaptation of species may take time, but our argument is that species will be able to fill in a niche that another species filled. If Jacob is not around to troll someone niche, this niche will be filled by Lee, who's more than happy to troll people in Jacob's absence. Oh, this means that you don't have a terminal impact here. When I see, there's not a point of incorporating it in the counterplan. Permutation. Regulatory negotiations have worked before, which proves the solvency for our counterplan, but also implementation of them on the policy level, implementation of the policy, and then regulatory negotiations as for the permutation magnifies the business confidence links because business leaders see this as a false offer. When you offer someone something, but they find out that you have already made a decision about it, and you have already begun to implement your decision, regardless of the offer that you make, and regardless of the negotiations that you may have with them, it means that all the negotiations that you provide for them are just lies, which means that they are more than they're punk of any credibility. Since business confidence, since the economy is a game that relies on credibility and trust of people that you interact with your money, it means that individuals are incapable of trusting the federal government. This decrease in business confidence is a direct internal link to investor confidence. That is on the dissent. Counterplan solves 100% of the case, and the 1AC is a dissent that outweighs the residual link that a net benefit could incur. The net benefit particularly. You say we have better discourse after implementation. I've already covered this above. Better discourse can only have a better discussion about the policies that the business leaders actually want can only happen before the business leaders before the farmers have to implement the policies because they can negotiate what they do and do not want. This means we get 100% access to the impact of our net benefit, which is climate change, which independently outweighs and internally linked to biodiversity collapse are a scenario because in a world where we don't have in a world where the ocean is too acidified to be able to grow any types of crops, then it means that we are not only incapable of giving the animals that drink the water in the Great Lakes any sort of drinking water that they can consume because it's too acidic and has too much carbon in it, but it also means that you're not capable of growing crops, which means there's not a point to doing your 1AC. Internally linked to trap. And makes biodiversity collapse absolutely inevitable in the world of climate change. Business confidence. Your econ resilient argument is not inclusive of the double dip recession that we were arguing. Additionally, when you try or die to get any type of resource, then it means that it necessarily goes nuclear. This creates a nuclear winter. That argument, that extrapolation goes conceded. This is a extinction level scenario that goes conceded. Economic collapse means that we cannot save species. Even at the very least, you prefer the strength of our links and the probability and magnitude of our impacts. We have several extinction level scenarios.
Go case in order, counterplan with discussion of the net benefits, and then biz con, and then kind of more general overview. Right. right, so first on our case, I would like to, they try and read a bunch of no solvency arguments, ultimately don't add up to much. In addition, give us, even if we don't have some solvency, we still have enough solvency to solve back for the affirmative. First argument I would like to send across all their no solvency arguments are all our unique disarguments about how this plan specifically has been enacted and worked in places such as California and Oklahoma, neither of which they refute, probably means that we can solve back first for their argument saying farmers won't do this, because it's empirically demonstrated that they do have to do this by our two examples they give, at the point where we read specific warrants saying why this solves, you should prefer specificity of our warrants. In addition, they say the EPA can mandate things, but that's just a blatantly false. EPA can mandate things. Next, they say algae will freeze and die in the cold. First of all, we're not merely talking about algae as an ecosystem that we're creating at the point where this, first of all, again, has been enacted. Probably need to solve back. In addition, algae do in fact do this because they're like microscopic organisms. They don't function like you would perceive a normal plant to function. Anyway, regardless, this doesn't cost anything to farmers because it's effectively creating a riparian zone that's an ecosystem for you, Judge. Ecosystems tend to live on even after winters. Regardless, our warrants solve back for all their solvency arguments. Next, on the advantage proper, first of all, they say the only arguments that are really significant here are the fact that this biodiversity collapse is non-unique and that we don't link to it. First of all, we do link to Lake Michigan because we give you a specific scenario about how runoff to Lake Michigan, we read a warrant about Lake Erie in the first speech, causes Lake Michigan and other lakes in the Great Lake region, causes collapse, causes eutrophication, causes fish and other algae to die, causes death of higher up of predators, causes creation of pesticides, causes total Great Lakes region collapse, which spills over. At the point where we have a very specific impact scenario we articulate, and their only argument against it is Lake Michigan doesn't matter. Probably means we link it to our disadvantage. And they say 99% of species have died, and all these arguments, these are irrelevant at the point where all of them, a huge amount of our animals are going to die now, and it's going to be really bad for the overall ecosystem, for farming, for the Great Lakes, because that'll eutrophy and die, and that's really bad for agriculture and all these other reasons. In addition, so we have 100% access to our biod impact scenario, which is key, which ultimately outweighs their impact scenario. First on magnitude, to the point where we read arguments about going global and they don't respond to those. And in addition, it outweighs in the sense that the probability is very high at the point where we use just a specific impact scenario. Probably means that this is going to solve, and this is happening in the school and has been observed, and we're the only plant we can check back for that. Next, so next on the counter plan. First, the perm's all we really need here, Judge. They read some weak solvency arguments. First of all, they're in a double bind. They say businesses won't like. First, we read an argument saying businesses will water this down. If businesses like this kind of regulation, then they probably will like this regulation. Probably means the perm solves because they'll be like, hey, look, this regulation happened. We can explain it to them. They won't be mad. If businesses don't like this kind of regulation, probably means they're going to water down the proposal, and they can't solve back for the advantage or the net benefit of their disadvantage. At the point where businesses will just water down this regulation and make this happen. Extend across the last argument my partner makes on this page, saying that businesses don't like regulations and they're just going to water down any kind of proposal made. However, when you mandate a proposal and then explain it to them, probably means it solves. They may read arguments saying that ultimately the businesses doing it before business or talking before we enact a plan is key because businesses won't freak out because business will clarify the business what's happening. However, this will just let us clarify the policy that's already been made, which probably means we solve back for all of that stuff through the permutation. So we're solving back for we solve back there's this proven solvency deficit to the counterplan, whereas we solve back for the net benefits and the disad because and we solve back for the net benefits and at the point where and the disad at the point where not the disad, but at the point where the perm solve back for net benefits because it's there. So next on the disad proper, I would like to say extend across my partner's argument saying we saw back for long-term agriculture collapse at the point where the impact scenario for the net benefit is even longer term than that, and the agriculture collapse in the United States would ultimately cause the impact of global warming. Probably means we control the internal into this if there's a solvency deficit to the counter plan because we saw back for global ag collapse. Next turn, extend across a turn that costs $25 billion in the Great Lakes region at the point where their impact scenario ultimately impacts out to global econ collapse in the United States, and we're preventing loss of money. Probably means this turn does in fact check back for this and improve the U.S. economy. They say debt ceiling. First of all, the Republican on the debt ceiling, they say this is specific to ags. However, the debt ceiling is included agriculture sector cuts. Probably mean the debt ceiling is there. In addition, they say obstruct. So we're clearly winning. Yes.
Pleasure debating you again. Pleasure debating you the first time. We haven't debated.
No,
Okay.
not.
Let's feel bad when